What's going on, everybody? It's the Old Weave, and I am a Magic player. And like all Magic players, I have opinions. And my opinion today is based on this thumbnail, is that there is what I call the Dark Triad of Magic. And by Dark Triad, I mean these are the three archetypes I would say are the most frustrating to play for a majority of the player base. And me making a Magic opinion, well, that's just sacrilege. But you're here for a reason. Let's get into it. So the reason why I say these three are the worst to play against is because they fundamentally kind of ignore the back and forth, which I think is the core of the game. And what I mean by that is the win condition between these decks are all based essentially on abusing mechanics to the game as opposed to naturally defeating your opponent. And that makes you kind of scratch your head like, what's the difference? I'll break it down. Naturally, in order to beat somebody in Magic, you want to reduce your life total to 0 or have some kind of card that says you legitimately win the game depending on the format. But these cards and these decks tend to focus on the idea that I'm going to win through alternative means in two of them, and the third meaning I don't necessarily care what you're playing, I'm just going to go face. Because there's a difference between aggro and burn. I'm making the distinction. There's a difference between aggro and burn. A very famous video from Mystic Studies, once talking about the history of red deck wins, made the quote, I believe Richard Garfield said that if you have a deck of 20 lands and 40 lightning bolts, your opponent will be dead on turn 4. And this kind of holds true to this day throughout all the archetypes of red throughout the histories of Magic. If you deck does the thing correctly and curves, your opponent is dead by turn 4, regardless of what they're playing or the kind of interaction they potentially may have. If you just have it, they're dead. And to me, it's not about who you're playing. The opponent doesn't matter here. And to me, that's like the antithesis of what it means to play Magic the Gathering. The back and forth of this game, it's why it's one of the best games of all time and still probably the king of card games to this day, with the fact that there's a back and forth all times. You can't really get luck sacked or hand trapped. You gotta actually have resources and mana. And not kind of making a shot at other card games, but that's one of the things that I enjoy most about Magic. And I feel like Burn is one of the main things, along with the other two, that kind of take away the back and forth. Because playing against Burn, it doesn't matter what deck you're playing. When you're playing against Burn, the number one thing on your mind is try not to die. Now, in relation to Infect, Infect is a way of an aggressive strategy. It's definitely an aggressive strategy, and how it kind of says one or two creatures is enough because I'm just going to pump this creature to the moon with the keyword Infect. I'm pretty sure those who play Magic at a longer time know that with Infect you get poison counters, and poison counters are not real damage, but they are a collection of numbers that say if you get the 10 poison, you basically die. No matter what your life total is, it could be 1,000, a million, for whatever it means. 10 Infect, you are dead. And over the years, it used to be not the strongest archetype, and then got some buffs with Phyrex to all be one with a new mechanic of Toxic versus Poison and Infect. These decks fundamentally try to go, I'm just going to clear the way for one creature, and this one creature is going to one-shot you. And on top of that, I'm going to have protection spells built in to make sure that you can never kill this thing when it actually matters the most. Because most Infect players don't just go all in on a creature and call it a day. No, they will accumulate the resources and usually the mana necessary to put a creature down that's unblockable, maybe even hexproof. If some Infects, I don't believe there's one that has Infect when being hexproof, that would be just absurd. But there is one card called Blighted Agent, which is unblockable. So it only takes usually 1, maybe 2 of your lucky hits to just win the game. Again, this is regardless of what the opponent's playing. And I know people in the comments probably are thinking about, bro, just play Doomblade, play Interaction. It's not that big of a deal. That's not the point I'm making. I understand that. I play Interaction in every format that I play. I understand that that's how you beat them. The point I'm making is that it, again, takes away the back and forth necessary of the game, because there is no outmaneuvering your opponent in terms of what their deck is playing. You're trying to outmaneuver them abusing a mechanic of the game. And again, I know there are people who are going to say I'm kind of like talking in circles, but what I'm trying to bring up the point is that an Infector will kill you when it hit the 10, no matter what. Versus a couple creatures that usually, if it's a 2-2, a 3-2, you've got realistically 7 to 9 turns if that's the only creature that they see and you just can't find a way to deal with it. You have turns to potentially draw on something. If you don't, you know what? It's just kind of how you shuffle them up. But with Infect, that kind of like removes half the clock, if not the entirety of the clock. It might just be 2 turns. And given the variance of the game, it's very frustrating to lose to. Me, myself, I think I may have lost a handful of times to Infect just in my modern days, but I was always like, this is annoying. Not the worst thing. And I would say I definitely have hated more Burn compared to Infect, but I've definitely seen many of players in my LGSs get super salty when they die to Infect, or you can kind of see it on their face when one creature managed to slip through, and that's all it took. Now, Mill's interesting because personally, and still to this day, I have never lost to Mill in the Modern format, and I've been playing Modern since 2021. So, not a long sample size, but I've played Yawgmoth, 4-color Control, Omnath, Indomitable Creativity. There's a few other decks. I even tried playing Tron and Merc type. I've played almost all of Modern at a certain point just because I have friends who had decks, or I would just swap one Modern deck for other deck, including Hammer Time. And again, never once lost to Mill. It's just a badge I wear, and I will continue to flex that till the day it doesn't come true. But the thing about Mill, I feel like this is kind of like a Commander bleed over effect, because if you talk to most people who say Mill in terms of 60 card, they're like, it's annoying, or sometimes they can get you. But if you go to the Commander players, they vehemently hate Mill. It is like one of the worst things they could see next to land destruction. And personally, I don't think it's that bad because most of all my Commander decks have black in them. So filling my graveyard is actually a good thing. Give me extra resources. Give me extra access to cards I haven't seen yet. If they're in my graveyard, they're basically in my hand. And I understand, like, apparently from the psychological aspect that, you know, there are cards you could have drawn, cards you might have needed, cards that may have helped you, but you still needed, you know, the lands to play them, you needed the time to play them. And Mill tends to be a hyper-aggressive strategy in terms of just trying to empty out your library, especially when they got buffed a couple years ago with a card like Tasha's Hideous Laughter, and then the second Ruin Grab, and now Jace Perfected Mind, which gives them a second version of Visions of Beyond. And again, we just go through time and time again these cards getting slightly buffed and just making these archetypes more and more viable. And personally, I'm like, it is annoying. It's very annoying to play against. But usually if you play the cards in your sideboard, if Mill is very prevalent in your meta, you'll be fine. But the point of this video is not necessarily talk about what I do in relation to these archetypes, but the community's output toward them. I find that people tend to complain the most with these three. That's why I call them the Dark Triad, because I can guarantee if you go to any LGS or any big event, you're going to find people who say the worst things to play against are these three, and one other secret archetype in the middle of this triangle that I disagree with, but I know most Magic players would say this is the worst to play against. And that is Control. And to me, I can't fathom why Control is even in the same breath as these other three. Because Control, fundamentally, they have to have it. Like, in a way, what I mean that is, Control mages need to have counter spells, card draw spells, and a win con. These are the main three things they need in order to beat any given deck. But the fourth thing that most people tend to forget, they need time. And depending on the format you're in, there might not be time to assemble all the pieces they need to actually win the game, because they're under constant pressure either through hand attack, or creature attack, or burned attack. Like, that's just so many avenues in Magic the Gathering that which you can play this game, which is why it's one of the greatest games ever, that it's really hard to play Control, I would say, in any 60 card format at a elite level, just because of how much mental brain power it takes to try to gauge yourself to the entirety of the field. And a lot of people who've never played Control have this notion that just counterspell everything, remove everything, that's all you need. And it's like, maybe if your opponents will tilt out and just quit, but most players will fight through that and try to find the way to squeeze through Control, put a creature out there that they can't answer, or just find a way to carry a creature land or creature making land to victory. And that is great, because I have been on both sides of the spectrum. I have seen myself try to beat a deck that had a Fountain Port, a White Castle, at any other kind of creature land. I just couldn't draw the removal. Or the flip side of trying to wiggle my way against the Control deck that's just constantly holding up mana, but I've got creature lands and ability to make creatures without spending anything on the stack. It is a great back and forth, and it's a great feeling when I do manage to achieve and win against the quote odds of Control. So when I look down to it, guys, I think that Control should never be in the same breath as the other three because they don't care about time. Like, that's an aspect that comes to Control versus the other three. Time is on their side because they're trying to win the game realistically in the first 4 turns. And I mean this on like a Goldfish solitaire style draw. Like, if they could draw it up best, turn 4, all their games should be over. But for a Control deck, that's just definitely not the case. I think the fastest I've ever won a Control game with blue-white Control was maybe turn 8, and that was with having a Teferi unanswered. That's what it took. So I had to play a 5-mana Planeswalker and have it not be impacted, attacked, or removed for 3 turns while drawing 3 extra cards. That's what it took to win that game as fast as possible. But again, I digress. I'm just a Magic player. I would say my opinion is valid. Some people say it's not, but that's the nature of the community. Let me know what you guys think are some more annoying parts of the game or archetypes you think deserve to be in a spot over the Dark Triad or the center eye of Control. GG's, guys.
Stop what you're doing.